The private dining room at Maria Blue was everything I'd dreamed of for my rehearsal dinner. Soft candlelight reflected off the harbor through floor-to-ceiling windows, while the scent of garlic and fresh herbs drifted from the open kitchen. 32 of my closest family and friends were seated around elegantly set tables, laughing and toasting as we celebrated the night before my wedding to David. I should have been perfectly happy. Instead, I felt the familiar knot in my stomach that always appeared when my extended family gathered together. "Natalie, sweetheart." My Aunt Linda's voice carried across the room as she approached my table, wine glass in hand. "This place is absolutely stunning. How on earth did you manage to book Maria Blue? I heard they're booked solid for months." I smiled, adjusting the simple gold necklace David had given me for our anniversary. "I got lucky with the timing." "Lucky?" My Uncle Frank laughed from the next table over. "Come on, Natalie. Nobody gets lucky with Maria Blue. This place costs more per person than most people make in a week." David squeezed my hand under the table, sensing my tension. He'd met my family enough times to know how these gatherings usually went. "The food is incredible," my cousin Sarah chimed in, holding up her fork with a perfect bite of seared scallop. "I looked at the menu online. This tasting course alone is like $200 per person." "200? Uncle Frank's voice got louder. "Jesus, Natalie. For 30 people you're looking at $6,000 just for dinner. Add in the wine pairings, the private room fee, the service charges." He whistled. "This has to be costing $10,000 minimum." The conversations at nearby tables quieted as people turned to listen. My face heated with embarrassment. "Frank," my mother said diplomatically, "it's Natalie's rehearsal dinner. She can celebrate however she wants." "Of course she can," Frank replied, cutting into his Wagyu beef with obvious appreciation. "I'm just wondering how a social worker affords this kind of celebration." There was the question that had been hanging in the air since the invitations went out, since I'd announced the wedding venue, since my family had first learned about the scale of tomorrow's celebration. "I work hard for my money," I said quietly. "I'm sure you do," Frank said, his tone suggesting otherwise. "But let's be realistic. You make what, 40,000 a year? 50? Even if you saved every penny, this one dinner is more than most people spend on their entire wedding." David's jaw tightened. "Natalie's financial situation isn't really anyone's business but ours." "Hey, I'm not trying to be nosy," Frank held up his hands defensively. "I'm just curious about the math. This wedding tomorrow, the venue, the flowers, the band. We're talking about serious money here." My cousin Marcus nodded from across the room. "The Ocean View Grand Ballroom alone costs like $15,000 just for the space. I know because we looked at it for our anniversary party and couldn't even come close to affording it." "Exactly." Frank pointed his fork at Marcus. "So either Natalie's been hiding some serious income, or someone else is footing the bill." The room fell uncomfortably quiet. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting for an explanation. "Maybe her fiancé's family is helping," Aunt Linda suggested diplomatically. David shook his head. "My parents offered but we declined. This is our celebration." "Then I don't get it," Frank said bluntly. "Natalie, I've known you your whole life. You drive a Honda, you live in a modest apartment, you work at a nonprofit. Nothing wrong with any of that, it's honest work. But this." He gestured around the elegant dining room. "This doesn't add up." My younger brother Mike cleared his throat. "Maybe we should just enjoy the dinner instead of interrogating the bride." "I'm not interrogating anyone," Frank protested. "I'm just saying, this wedding's too expensive for you, Natalie. Way too expensive. So who's really paying?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Around the room I could see my family members exchanging glances, all thinking the same thing Frank had just voiced. David started to respond, but I placed a hand on his arm. "You're right, Uncle Frank," I said calmly. "This is expensive. See? I'm not trying to be a jerk here. I'm just being realistic." "Very realistic," I agreed, standing up from my chair. "If you'll excuse me for just a moment." I walked toward the restroom, but instead ducked into the kitchen area where I knew the manager's office was located. James Rodriguez looked up from his computer as I knocked on the open door. "Ms. Romano, is everything going well out there? The staff mentioned your uncle seems to be enjoying the wine pairings." "A little too much," I said with a smile. "James, I need you to do something for me." Of course. Anything. I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo of Frank that I'd taken earlier in the evening. This is my uncle at table 12. I need you to present him with the check for tonight's dinner. James looked confused. The check. But Ms. Romano, your account is set to autopay and besides as the owner. I know. But I want him to see the actual itemized bill. All of it. The food, wine, service charges, room rental, everything. Understanding dawned in James's eyes. Family dynamics. Something like that. Can you make it look official? Like he needs to settle the bill before leaving. Absolutely. I'll print an itemized receipt and present it properly. He paused. Should I mention that you're? Not yet. Let's see how he reacts to the bill first. I returned to the dining room where Frank was regaling the table with a story about his latest fishing trip, gesturing dramatically with his wine glass. So there I was 20 miles out and this marlin has to be at least 200 pounds. Uncle Frank, I interrupted gently, before you continue I wanted to thank everyone for being here tonight. The room quieted as I remained standing at my place. David and I are so grateful to have you all share this special evening with us. It means everything to have family and friends who love and support us. Murmurs of hear, hear and congratulations filled the room. I also wanted to address the questions about how we can afford all this. I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Frank leaned back in his chair, looking satisfied that he was finally going to get answers. Because you're right, Uncle Frank. On a social worker's salary, this would be completely impossible. Nods around the room confirmed that everyone had been thinking the same thing. The thing is, I continued, I'm not just a social worker. James appeared at my elbow carrying a leather folder. Excuse me, sir, he said to Frank in his professional manager voice. I need to settle your table's account before we can serve dessert. Frank looked confused. Settle the account? I thought Natalie was paying for dinner. Yes, sir, but we need a credit card authorization for the final amount. James opened the folder and placed the itemized receipt in front of Frank. If you could just review this and provide payment. Frank looked down at the paper and I watched the color drain from his face. $8,473? He read aloud, his voice cracking. The entire room went silent. That can't be right, Frank stammered. Let me see. Aunt Linda leaned over to look at the receipt. Her wine glass nearly slipped from her fingers. $8,000? For one dinner. James maintained his professional composure. That's correct, ma'am. 32 guests for the 7-course tasting menu with premium wine pairings, plus the private dining room rental and service charges. But I can't. I don't have. Frank looked around desperately. Natalie, you said you were paying. I am paying, I said calmly. James, there seems to be some confusion. Please put this on my account. James nodded. Of course, Ms. Romano. My apologies for the mix-up. Frank was staring at the receipt like it might change if he looked hard enough. $8,000, he repeated. For one meal. The price you were so concerned about, I pointed out gently. I didn't think. Frank looked up at me, realization starting to dawn. Natalie, how did you know the exact amount? Because this is my restaurant, Uncle Frank. The silence that followed was deafening. Your restaurant? Aunt Linda whispered. I own Maria Blue. Have for 3 years now. Marcus nearly choked on his wine. You own this place? Along with 2 other restaurants in the city. Romano Hospitality Group. Frank was still staring at the bill. Romano, like your last name. Exactly like my last name. David was grinning now, finally able to relax as the truth came out. But you work at the community center, Sarah said, looking confused. I volunteer at the community center. 2 days a week. The Romano Foundation sponsors several social programs throughout the city. Foundation. Mike asked. The Romano Foundation for Community Development. We fund after-school programs, job training, housing assistance. I looked directly at Frank. You know, helping people who can't afford $8,000 dinners. Frank's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Natalie, Mom said slowly, how long have you owned restaurants? I bought my first place 5 years ago. A small cafe in Westfield that was going under. I'd been working in restaurant management since college, learning the business. When I had enough capital, I started investing. Capital from where? Frank finally found his voice. From working 60-hour weeks managing other people's restaurants, living in a studio apartment, and driving that Honda you mentioned because I was saving every penny. I walked over to the windows overlooking the harbor, gesturing to the view. This location came up for sale 18 months ago. The previous owners had great food but terrible business management. I saw the potential. James cleared his throat. If I may, Ms. Romano has transformed this place. Revenue up 200% since she took over, 5-star reviews, booked solid for months in advance. Booked solid, I repeated, looking at Frank. Which is why it was so difficult for you to get a reservation for your anniversary dinner last month. Frank's face went pale. That was you. You're the owner who turned us down. Actually, that was James. I don't get involved in individual booking decisions. I paused. Though he did mention that particular caller was quite rude to our staff. Aunt Linda elbowed Frank hard in the ribs. Natalie, David said proudly, tell them about tomorrow. What about tomorrow? Mom asked. The wedding reception, I said. It's not at the Ocean View Grand. Marcus looked confused. But the invitations said. The invitations said Ocean View Grand Ballroom. They didn't say which Ocean View Grand Ballroom. I pulled out my phone and showed them a photo of an elegant event space with soaring ceilings and crystal chandeliers. This is the Grand Ballroom at Oceano, my newest restaurant. We don't typically host weddings, but I thought we'd make an exception for tomorrow. You own 3 restaurants? Sarah asked weakly. 3 restaurants, a catering company, and I'm breaking ground on a boutique hotel next year. The room was so quiet I could hear the kitchen staff preparing dessert in the background. But why didn't you tell us? Mom asked. Why let us think you were struggling? I considered the question carefully. Because I wanted to know if you'd love and support me regardless of my bank account. I wanted to know if you'd be proud of me for helping people at the community center, not just for owning successful businesses. My words hung in the air. We are proud of you, Mike said quietly. We were always proud of you. Were you? I looked around the room. Because for the past 5 years, every family gathering has included comments about my modest lifestyle and limited prospects. Questions about when I'd get a real job or find a husband who could take care of me properly. Several family members looked uncomfortable. Tonight, Uncle Frank spent 20 minutes questioning how I could possibly afford this dinner, implying that someone else must be paying because I couldn't possibly manage it on my own. Frank was studying the tablecloth like it contained the secrets of the universe. I wanted to see if anyone would defend me, I continued. If anyone would say, maybe Natalie's more successful than we realized, or maybe we don't know the whole story. The silence stretched uncomfortably. But instead I got interrogated about my finances at my own rehearsal dinner. Natalie, Frank said quietly, I'm sorry. I was being an ass. Yes, you were. I thought I was being, I don't know, protective? Like maybe someone was taking advantage of you. Who would be taking advantage of me? I thought maybe David's family was paying and you were too proud to admit it. Or maybe you'd gotten in over your head with debt. David shook his head. Frank, I'm a high school teacher. My family's comfortable, but we're not $8,000 dinner comfortable. How was I supposed to know? Frank protested. Natalie never talks about money, never shows off, drives that old car. Because showing off isn't important to me. Making sure my restaurants provide good jobs and great food is important. Supporting community programs is important. Taking care of my family is important. I gestured around the room. This dinner, this wedding, these aren't about showing off. They're about celebrating with people I love. James reappeared with a dessert cart laden with individual chocolate soufflés and champagne glasses. Ms. Romano, shall we serve dessert now? Please. As the staff began distributing desserts, conversations slowly resumed around the room. But the energy had shifted completely. Sarah approached me as I sat back down. Natalie, I owe you an apology too. I've made assumptions. We all make assumptions. But I should have known you better. You've always been smart, always been driven. I should have realized you were up to something bigger than what we could see. My cousin Marcus joined us. The anniversary party we mentioned, the one where we couldn't afford Ocean View Grand? That was actually here, wasn't it? I nodded. James showed me the inquiry. You were looking for a Sunday brunch for 20 people. We ended up at that chain restaurant in the mall. How was it? Marcus laughed. Terrible. We should have saved up and done it right. Or, I said gently, you could have called me. Family gets special pricing. Even after tonight? Especially after tonight. Because now you know the whole story. As the evening wound down, Frank approached my table one more time. Natalie, I need to apologize properly. Okay. I was completely out of line. You're my niece, and I should have trusted that you knew what you were doing instead of assuming you didn't. Thank you. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why social work? I mean, if you own all these businesses, why spend time volunteering at the community center? I thought about Mrs. Garcia, who'd come to us desperate for help finding stable housing for her 3 kids. About 16-year-old James, who'd aged out of foster care and needed job training. About the dozens of families our programs helped every month. Because success isn't just about making money, Uncle Frank. It's about using whatever resources you have to make things better for other people. Frank nodded slowly. That's actually pretty wise. I learned it from watching my parents work their whole lives to help our family succeed. And from watching you and Aunt Linda support your kids through college even when money was tight. You saw that. I saw a lot of things. Family taking care of family even when it was hard. So this whole time when we thought you were the one who needed help, I was the one trying to figure out how to help everyone else. David stood up and clinked his wine glass. If I could have everyone's attention for a moment. The room quieted. I wanted to thank Natalie for the most incredible rehearsal dinner I could have imagined. The food, the setting, the company, everything has been perfect. Applause filled the room. But more than that, I wanted to thank her for showing me what real success looks like. It's not about what you own or how much money you make. It's about using your gifts to lift up the people around you. He looked directly at me. Tomorrow I get to marry a woman who saves historic restaurants, creates jobs for hundreds of people, and still finds time to volunteer with kids who need extra support. I'm the luckiest guy in the world. The applause was louder this time, accompanied by hear, hear and genuine smiles. As we prepared to leave, James pulled me aside. Ms. Romano, everything is set for tomorrow's reception. The staff is excited to host your wedding. Thank you, James. For everything. That was beautifully handled, by the way. Your uncle learned something important tonight. We all did. The next evening, our wedding reception at Oceano was everything I'd dreamed it would be. 300 guests enjoyed a 7-course dinner while a jazz quartet played on the terrace overlooking the harbor. Frank gave a toast that brought tears to my eyes. To Natalie and David. May your marriage be built on the same foundation as Natalie's success. Hard work, generous hearts, and the wisdom to know that real wealth comes from lifting others up. During the father-daughter dance, Dad whispered in my ear, I've always been proud of you, sweetheart. Tonight, I'm proud that everyone else finally sees what I've always known. What's that? That my daughter is extraordinary. Rich or poor, successful or struggling, you've always had the biggest heart in the family. As David and I swayed to our wedding song, surrounded by family and friends in my own restaurant, I realized that Uncle Frank had been right about one thing. The wedding was too expensive for a social worker. But it was exactly right for a woman who'd built something meaningful, shared her success generously, and learned that the best celebrations happen when everyone you love finally knows who you really are.